Playing Capture the Flag is one of, if not the best way to learn cybersecurity and skills within cybersecurity. This past weekend, December 16th to the 17th, myself and a couple of other ragtag hackers were putting on and hosting the NahamConCTF, the Capture the Flag competition, alongside the NahamCon EU virtual conference. Now, I had a whole couple of challenges in there alongside a bunch of others from the other smart and incredible folks that I end up working with, but in this video I want to showcase one of them that was kind of just, clued in on, that I got some inspiration to put together by a weird gimmick that I found myself stuck in another Capture the Flag. It was inspiration to build and create another Capture the Flag challenge to again train and teach people and hopefully have them learn some other cool new tricks. With that said, let's dive into the showcase, do some show and tell, but first, hey, some quick love for our sponsors. PlexTrack is the premier cybersecurity reporting and collaboration platform that makes penetration testers, red teamers, and cybersecurity teams more efficient, effective, and proactive. With PlexTrack, you can eliminate the dull and boring drudgery of report writing, so you can focus on what's really important: hacking, the engagement, the assessment, and the campaign. And it's not just for offense. PlexTrack is a collaboration portal between both red and blue teams to facilitate effective purple teaming and faster remediation. While coordinating between multiple team members, you easily aggregate findings, pull in reusable content from write-up databases and content libraries, and track and measure progress in real time. You can import assets from common CSV files, Nmap, Nessus, and many of your other favorite tools. PlexTrack boasts 25 plus integrations, and that list is always growing. You can do even more with PlexTrack's runbooks, with scripts mapped to the MITRE ATT&CK framework or planned from Atomic Red Team and Sight, or assessments built off of the CIS controls and benchmarks. And of course, show the impact with PlexTrack's analytics and visualizations. Customize your reports with your team's logo and details, and with a single click, export your report and send it off to the client. Spend more time hacking and less time reporting. Learn how you can boost your team's efficiency by 30% and cut reporting time by up to 65% with PlexTrack. Seriously, check them out. I have great colleagues and peers that use PlexTrack every day for reporting. Sign up for a demo and claim your free month of PlexTrack right now at https://jh.io/PlexTrack. Huge thanks to PlexTrack for sponsoring this video. Jumping on over to the computer screen, I am inside of my Kali Linux virtual machine here. I'm going to hop over to the challenges on ctf.nahamcon.com, and I'm going to scroll down to one of the challenges that I created inside of the miscellaneous category. This one was called, as soon as I can find it, there we go. This challenge is called The Space Between Us. At the time of recording, after the competition, it has about 71 solves, tagged with a medium difficulty. Dynamic scoring brought this point value down to 120 points, put together by me. And it says, hey, I've never felt this close to a character before. I hope the feeling is mutual. Challenge prompt says, escalate your privileges and return the flag out of root's home directory. Well, alrighty, we can go ahead and click start on this instance. There is no downloadable attachment or other files to go ahead and pull down here. We just are greeted with this connection string. Hey, go ahead and connect with the command netcat or nc on the host challenge.nahamcon.com and a randomly generated port. So with that, we can go and start to connect to this thing. I will go ahead and showcase how this challenge was built along with how we solve it. But to do that, hey, let's hop on over to our command line. You know what? I'll go ahead and minimize this and then we can get this terminal up and ready here for us. And I'll go ahead and paste in with Shift-Control-V on my keyboard to paste into the terminal that netcat command. And here we are. We're immediately given with a prompt, user@challenge, kind of looking like a regular Linux PS1 or bash prompt here with a born again shell. So if I were to go ahead and enter ls to look around the file system, we do have a readme.md file. So I'll try and go ahead and cat that out. I'll cat readme.md, but immediately have an error, a strange thing. binsh, or the shell, is telling us here's an error, cat readme.md not found. And it's odd because the space character in between this program that we're trying to invoke, the running command, and its arguments, or the parameters, the space is being removed. And that immediately is the gimmick of this challenge alongside and in line with that challenge title, The Space Between Us. And that seemingly, if I were to try and echo, please subscribe. Well, if I can type, all of the spaces are removed within our commands. Okay, that is the hardship that we're working with. So we can't ls tac la. We can't do anything that might end up needing a space. And that's the gimmick. Now, I don't know how long folks were fighting with this and were wrestling with this, but I will speed run us to the solution while folks might be Googling around and looking for how they could get out of command jails or bash jails or restricted shells or environments where, hey, some characters are filtered, some symbols and, things that you might end up entering on your keyboard are not allowed to run or just won't be present. I've seen this, and this is exactly where I was kind of getting the idea from. When I was trying to do some server-side template injection, another capture the flag or another CTF, it seemed like, I can't enter spaces that might be used within this command. Or things have to be base 64 encoded or decoded in some strange way to try and get characters through it. I could literally try to do base 64 tac D to decode some characters, but even then, that needs a space in there. And if I were to try and echo something out, well, that won't really work for me. I could try to use like a here doc string, like cat something up to an EOF file redirected to something, and then maybe base 64 decode that. It wouldn't work. And I thought, man, wouldn't it be kind of slick to maybe get some folks into an environment where you have to work around this? Now, again, if you were to Google around, if you were to do some researches and maybe find some of those cheat sheets for working inside of restricted shells or filtered environments, you might stumble across a variable called the IFS variable, or the internal field separator, I think is what that acronym might be. And I'll show it to you here. If I actually open up a new terminal, what I could try to do is just check out env, and I'll grep for IFS, but it's not shown right here within, I guess, Z shell that I might be in. I don't know if it's like specific in bash or whatever, because if I try to echo out $IFS to denote the variable syntax, a little prefix in bash will give us within shell scripting languages like Z shell, as I'm in right now for Kali, that will go ahead and get the value of the variable. That doesn't seem to do anything. Maybe it's a new line present, because I am seeing 3 new lines created here rather than 2 for just echo. But you could refer to this with curly braces surrounding a variable, and that gives bash, or again, whatever shell scripting language you might be in, a little bit more, emphasis that hey, this is a variable and that's what you need to expand out here. So you could use this IFS value in this variable here to try and squeeze in and then go ahead and execute things that include spaces. Let me show you that super duper quick. I'll go ahead and close this shell and then get back into this connection here. If I tried to echo with a $ and IFS here, we could go ahead and say that please IFS again to replace our spaces, subscribe. And there it is. Also means I could go ahead and ls IFS tac LA to actually run the syntax with LFS tac LA. But you might notice there's an oddball thing in here. Here's a .server.py. This is actually, for folks that I will showcase super duper soon, this is the shell that's controlling this shell itself. We could cat that out now. We could, because we know how to get around the spaces restriction, we could check out what is cat.server.py. And here's the source code for this application. Hey, got our shebang line, Python 3, couple of imports. Here's our stupid prompt where I'm getting Colorama to display different colors around, the unique portions of what would look like a PS1 prompt, or that variable for the prompt in shells. However, it's fake. You're just in a loop, in a little while one loop. As we handle a connection to the service, we receive information given the prompt, and that's the user input. And then we go ahead and replace all the spaces with nothing. Same thing with tab characters, same thing with new line characters. We do not allow it to include spaces in the given command. If there are no spaces, or even if the command simply is exit, then we'll return and break out of this little function here, close the connection, and then we print out what that might be on the server side. This was probably left over from me writing the code here. But then ultimately we end up going ahead and executing this with subprocess.popen or popen or whatever process open you want with the command with shell equals true. Now that is normally, hey, what you shouldn't do, but of course, that is its own vulnerability, which shell equals true. Granted, this is the challenge. I'm trying to simulate a shell for the player. Standard out is being pushed to the subprocess pipe, so is standard error, and so is standard input, and then we'll go ahead and receive the standard output and standard error that we could communicate from the created process here. We send that out, go ahead and grab it, give it to the player. And you're in this simulated shell. It is not a real shell, however. And with that, we know we are, in fact, seeing our spaces completely removed and replaced out of this instance. So what do? We need to escalate our privileges, but typing in this thing is just going to be a pain because, look, we can't enter spaces. We can't really naturally navigate and work around our shell. So I would advise, and I would recommend, I think this was probably what I ended up trying to coax a whole lot of players as we were trying to help and, offer moderation and technical support, right? And when folks were seeing like, man, I'm stuck at a wall here. How do I get past this thing? Try to get your own shell. Try to make it so that you can fully get out of this restriction so you aren't inhibited by spaces being removed from your command prompt. We need a real shell, something that's not the silly Python service that we're trapped in that's removing all of our spaces. So ultimately, I think we need a reverse shell. Question is, how are we going to get one of those? How could we go ahead and actually, stage a reverse shell with this command substitution or replacing spaces, no spaces allowed in the way? Well, let's go get some reverse shell syntax and let's see what we can do here. I'm going to go to revshells.com and we could get just a regular bash shell and see how well this would work. Let me go ahead and copy this syntax. And truthfully, I will want to maybe subble a temp playground if just so I can stage a lot of this, because we know ultimately we need to remove our spaces here. So I'm going to use Control H to do some find and replace, and I'll replace every space with, just as we know, our $ curly braces around the variable IFS, the internal field separator. I'll hit replace all or Control Alt Enter on my keyboard, and now we have the syntax. This works for me, but I got to be honest, I didn't even supply an IP address and a port number to use. So ultimately, we should go ahead and stage one of those. Here's what I'll do. I'll go ahead and netcat tac LNVP, so I can listen without DNS resolution very verbosely on port quad 9. That should work for me. And I'll use ngrok super duper quick so that I can bring that out to the open internet. Because again, this is, hey, I'm in a home network. I've got a firewall and NAT and all that crap. So it's not going to be able to reach my device naturally because this endpoint is out on the open internet. So let me ngrok TCP on that quad 9 port. And you can see, hey, cool, we've got our IP address here. I will grab this, bring that back to rev shells, change our IP address, and port is present as 15197. Okay, so fingers crossed. Now we should be able to work with this syntax, and I'll bring that right back into our quick and easy Sublime text find and replace. And now we've got this syntax set up. If I set this to bash, I'll turn word wrap on. You'll notice there's our code. So let's see if this will work for us. There are some special characters and some unique things happening here. So that is kind of the issue that we might run into. And that, how are we going to be able to execute these things? Because it uses some of those other special characters. Is the IFS or the field separator going to get in our way? Did I break this thing? No, it's cool. Shift Control V to paste this thing in. I'll hit enter, but that dies. Bad syntax error. File descriptor number isn't working for us. So that normally would end up executing. In fact, if I probably put this inside of bash tac C and there's that syntax that we might be able to use. Whoops, I don't know what I just pasted there. I think I just tried to run it. Let's add in those IFS field separators. And will this break stuff? Let's try that. No, still gets pretty wonky. So that won't work. Trying to use bash to invoke it with bash tac C, but that isn't coming through for us. So we need something else, right? Let's go back to our revshells.com and let's see if we could use something else. We know the server has Python because it is running a Python service, right? In fact, could I even run Python? Since this is a fake pseudo shell, it'll probably go interactive and then break. So maybe executing Python will not work very well for me. Unless I could try and use Python IFS tac V. Oh, it's a lot of stuff. How about Python IFS tac version? Will that run? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we do have Python readily in our path and we're using Python 3.11. So let's try and get a Python shell. Here's one here. We're exporting our host and using some of this in bash before we invoke it with Python. How about Python 2? Okay, that just works well. Let me see if this will work. We'll copy this syntax, paste it in here. I don't see any spaces present within the actual Python syntax. Oh, other than this, but that shouldn't be too much of an issue. We do, however, need to remove these. Will that work for me here? Because I have this IFS within the Python code. I don't know how well that will work. We know we need it for the actual syntax of running Python, but being able to import things is kind of going to be problematic. Let's see what we could do here. Let me run this. I'll see if I can go ahead and execute this. No, invalid syntax. Python does not like my IFS value being in there. You could probably do some weird shenanigans with the import dunders and then like setting each of those as needed to what you've imported them. But I do want to take this opportunity to show you and at least remind you of another silly thing. This is a stupid tool that I put together. There's a John Hammond pyminify on GitHub. And it's so dumb. It's so stupid. And it's just a crappy repository because there's like literally nothing needed here. But it says, hey, I put this in a repository because I constantly forget to save this and I find myself needing it every now and again. This code takes a Python script file and then converts it into a compressed one-line command to be ran with Python tac-c with strings all put together with CHR. So here's an example of the test.py. Here's just a simple print script. And here's pyminify as the tool that will go ahead and kind of clean this all up, replacing necessary things to execute code. All in a small compressed CHR thing where you're just adding string values together, but you don't have any of the original string itself. Kind of wild, kind of weird, but trust me, we might be able to do something neat with it. I'll go ahead and grab this Git link. And then I will open up yet another terminal. I'll bring myself down into temp. Let's make a directory for spaces. How about that? And let's git clone this thing down. So if I were to move into that directory, pyminify is a script that we want to run, but it does need a script as an argument to pass to it. So we'll give it that test.py. And this is the garbage that it spits out, right? Hey, we'll use Python tac-c with exec and compile to create a code object that gets executed with all of our crappy syntax with CHR. Now, remember test.py would just simply print, I'm a test, and there it is. We use Python to mangle or mix up or represent that syntax. And obviously there are really no spaces in here other than these, but those aren't necessary. Like you could just remove those. It's again following an argument. So that at least gets us around that import statement. I'm sure you could do that in other ways, but I figured, this might be a good reminder. And in case you ever need something as dumb as this, you know where to find it on my repo and pyminify. So what if we go ahead and here's our reverse shell syntax. Let's go grab this thing and let's change our test.py to this. Now, it is no longer going to be using Python tac-c because we want the pure Python code on its own. So we need to go ahead and remove those silly Python tac-c string openers and not that. So now we have this, that should be our reverse shell syntax with our import line that will require spaces. But if I save this file, I appreciate, I don't know if Python Black just like cleaned that up for whatever reason. I think it linted and formatted it for me. But it looks good. And we could go ahead and use our Python tac-c, all this crap. Let's use pyminify on our new test.py. And now we got all this junk that is our reverse shell syntax. Now, bear in mind, if I move this back into our little playground tab, looks like a whole lot of crap. We don't need these spaces after the other arguments, but all the other spaces, because it's just like within the bash portion of this command, not within the Python code, we can safely replace those spaces with our IFS field separator. And that should work, right? Like it looks like garbage. I know it looks like nonsense, but this will be how we can get a reverse shell with those limitations. It's one way we could do it. I'm sure there are plenty of other ways, but let's bring this thing down. Let's make sure our TCP ngrok tunnel is still working. We've got netcat listener up on the side here, and I'll reconnect to this thing and then just slap all this in. Shift Control V. Once I hit enter, we'll see this bounce over through ngrok and get a reverse shell. Hopefully, no. Unterminated quoted string? What are you talking about? Syntax error, word unexpected, expecting another parentheses? Okay, I made a mistake here. Exec compile, CHR. I don't think this is wrong. What if we go from the top? Let's just keep the original thing in here, but then replace our IFS manually for the bash command. Will that work for me here? Or again, those spaces inside of the Python syntax will be removed, but that's not an issue. Let's try it. No. Did I get that shell wrong? Maybe. Grab this. Put that back in a test and try this all over again. I'm sketched out by those random imports up here. We can kind of finagle this a little bit more. and we don't need that PTY. We could just like do an OS. You don't even need PTY. But let's turn off my linter. I want to toggle black on save, and let's just save this. And now let's get back to running that pyminify script. So I'll pass that down here. Hopefully this is good. And we know that we just need to go ahead and change these IFS values. I'm hopeful that that's a-okay. Let's try it out. Slap this in. No, still dying on me. Do I need bash to invoke this? Unterminated quoted string. You literally are using that right there. Let's use bash taxi. How about that? And again, you could do this in any other way. Maybe just trying to fix some of that Python code would work well for us. But let's see how this looks. Still dead. Crap. Let's try using another Python one. Why do you import PTY? You just don't need to. Ooh, I wonder if it's whining about our single quotes or our double quotes in here. Like when we took this, we don't need to be using any variables on the inside. So let's try and use this with single quotes rather than double quotes. I'm just kind of finagling with this to make sure that it will work well for me. But how about that? IFS, and there's an exec compile and everything with pyminify. And again, we can remove these spaces because I don't think that they will be necessary. They are going to get removed regardless. But is it just like the command is too long, or why does this not work? Let's try this one more time. I'll reconnect, slap this in. Still no dice. Well, other options are kind of, as we mentioned, just taking all of these to our dunder functions. We can try that. How about socket equals import socket? Well, I mean, might as well. And then we don't need to end up using our pyminify, but we know that it's a thing for future reference. And let's do the very same with OS. And then we can do the very same for PTY. So PTY could equal the object returned from importing PTY. And now there are no spaces present, correct? Other than a simple os.dupe. That's kind of stupid. Control F for spaces. Oh, we got one for pty.spawn. That's it. None found. All right, let's try this. Remember, we will need to run Python with our internal field separator, separating the space. Same thing here just as well. And now we can put our single quotes, paste all this in, and then use single quotes yet again. Ooh, actually, because I'm using single quotes in this, it kind of is not going to like that. So let me replace my single quotes with a double quotes in this string. And let's try that one more time. Connect it back in. Let's use Python, IFS, taxi, IFS. And now let's use single quotes to slap that all in. We have double quotes only for our Python syntax. Let's try it. Let enter on this. And there it is. All right, awesome, 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 awesome. You can see, hey, I am user at the space between us. My shell is way down here. But now I can ls tac LA, and I have no restrictions on entering spaces in my commands. I can echo, please subscribe without any issue, random cases. I dig it. We're all good now. So what should we do? Well, we do need to privesc. We said we needed to get to the flag in /root. However, I can't get in there. We could look for super duper simple privilege escalations. You could run something like linpeas or others. And I'm trying to remember which gimmick I put in here. I think it might just be that bash is setuid. No, that is not. Okay, so it must be the other little privesc trick that I did want to showcase. If folks got this full reverse shell, you would have been able to track down the fact that there is other things that are misconfigured on this endpoint within this host. Now that we have our raw reverse shell, we could do kind of anything we wanted to. We could explore, we could poke around, and you might do this for however long, but I did something weird where the etc password file, etc/etc/password or password, is world writable. If I try and echo all of this out, ls tac LA, take a look. I don't know if you can see it here, but password is world writable. Now, what you might be able to do is completely clobber or remove this thing. You could manipulate it. You could do anything you really wanted to with it. You could honestly, hey, just beat it up. You could add a new user. You could manipulate it anyway because it is writable. Because we're stuck in a raw reverse shell, We can't easily get Nano open or VI or Vim or Emacs or whatever the heck you want. What we can do, though, is use some simple cat here docs, etc. So if I were to cat out the original value of password, I don't want to break this thing. So I am just going to copy, maybe the necessary parts. What does this file look like to begin with? So if I paste this into Sublime Text, you can see here's our regular default value of password. We might be able to, copy and create our own new user or our hacker that we could get it away with and do whatever we might like. But what if we just we wanted a privesc? Maybe we just add and modify the root entry here. What I like to do is just remove this X, because that would mean that, the root's user or that user's password is stored in etc. shadow in whatever encrypted form. But we could just kill it. We could just remove it. If I remove this X, well, then okay, it's no longer going to end up reading whatever the root password might be. Like if I were to try to, in the shell, SU to switch you to root, I need to know the root password. It's going to ask me for it. I don't know what it is. It could be anything. It could be password, but it'll tell me, hey, that's not going to work. That's the wrong password. So rather than having this X here, let's remove it. And let's say the root user no longer has a password. Now, again, I'm going to copy all this. I'm going to select all, right-click copy, and we could just simply slap this into the shell with a little here doc. We could use cats all the way up to EOF to denote, hey, we're going to spit out an end of file here doc, and let's put it into etc. password. Yeah. Did I completely kill this thing just now? I always get that syntax wrong for here docs. Did I break it? I think I did. Whoops. Okay. Anyway, let's try and do that one more time. Is it 2 ones for here doc and then the file name? I think it is. Yeah. Okay, cool. So now I'm in another mini prompt where I just have the single arrow denoting, hey, I'm going to read your input until you enter this EOF syntax. So let me hit enter a couple more times and then finally hit EOF as my output. But I mistyped etc. password. So I'm going to have to do that one more time. Let's cat read to EOF and then redirect that to etc. to as password, spelled properly. Spit all this out and then finally EOF. Now that should be written if I try to cat out etc. password. And it is. Okay. So original file is still intact now that we've fixed it. Whoops. And root password is removed. So I can now switch user to root. Let me SU root, and now I'm root. You can see it. Hey, we got root in the username and the prefix here, and by hashtag for the prompt value. And just like that, now we are the root user. Our ID is 0, user ID is 0, and we can move into /root, enter ls, and there is our flag.txt. Now, no permission denied, no issues with access controls. We can finally cat the flag and call this challenge complete. And that's it. That was no space between us. Kind of silly, kind of dumb. I know there's not, maybe some practical use of that, but I do feel like in some cases, wow, I was running out of time on that container. I do feel like it is something that might be worthwhile to know. If anything, that IFS value could be handy in some specific character shells or jails or things you might get in the way. So that's it. And maybe pyminify, I hope, could be hopefully a useful tool at some point, if just to know, hey, you know that it exists. And eventually, honestly, I think that etc. password trick is kind of slick. If there's, for whatever reason, you can write into etc. password, you could add your own user, or you could just nerf out another user's password. But finally, after all that long rambling, after all that noise and nonsense, we're done. We solved the space between us challenge, and that there were no spaces allowed between characters. So that was the gimmick with the challenge title and description, but I hope you enjoyed that challenge. I hope you had some fun with it. I hope you did play NahamConCTF and had a whole lot of fun. I was kind of pleased with that challenge. I know it was silly, I know it was simple, but maybe there is some learning from, and hopefully you could be able to take that on for other Capture the Flag competitions that you participate in and other challenges that you take on and try. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you did enjoy this video, please do all those YouTube algorithm things. Like, comment, subscribe if you would be so kind. Hey, we do give some love to our sponsors, and I'm just really grateful for their support. It helps me continue to do stuff like this and create videos and create content and keep this channel growing. So if you don't mind, hey, go check them out. Go see what links we got in the description, and that's the way we can keep on having this party. Take care, everyone.